Ever notice those tiny details you kind of just zoom past? And then suddenly you realize, whoa, that little thing makes a huge difference.
Yeah, like, I don't know, forgetting to add baking powder to a cake.
Right. Or accidentally putting salt in your coffee instead of sugar. Makes you wonder how something so small can throw everything off, doesn't it? Well, today we're tackling one of those seemingly minor but surprisingly significant details in the world of AI capitalization.
That's right. We're going deep on capitalization, all those ways you can hit the shift key when you're talking to an AI.
Exactly. We're going to look at how things change when you use all lowercase, all caps, which always feels like shouting, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
Or even just that typical mix of upper and lowercase.
It's all about the case of your input.
Yeah.
Whether it's all lowercase or shouting in all caps, or
Yeah.
that casual mix, or even, like those fancy initial caps.
Yeah. Or proper sentence case.
We're looking at how all of that actually affects a classification large language model agent.
Okay, now I can already sense some of you out there thinking, hold on a second. Capitalization. Does that little shift in letters really matter to these super smart AI brains?
And honestly, that's the exact question that makes this whole topic so fascinating.
I totally agree, because once you start peeling back the layers, you realize that understanding the subtle aspect can be a real game changer.
Oh, for sure.
It's all about getting the information you need from these AIs quickly and efficiently, and without feeling like you're drowning in a sea of tech jargon. It's like unlocking a more precise and predictable way to have a conversation with AI.
You got it.
So to really dig into this, we've gone through a ton of interesting material.
Oh, yeah, a whole mix of stuff. We're talking about formal linguistic analyses, those side-by-side comparisons of how AI responds to different things. Then there's the nitty-gritty technical breakdowns of how these models actually process what we type. And to top it off, we've even got some practical advice from the world of prompt engineering.
So for this deep dive, our mission is crystal clear. We want to pull out the absolute most important insights from all of these sources so you can walk away with a solid understanding of how capitalization actually influences LLM classification. We're talking actionable knowledge you can use right away.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with all of this?
Well, I think a good place to start is with our intuition, our gut feelings. Let's forget about all the technical stuff for a moment and just talk about what people have casually noticed about how LLMs react to different ways of using capital letters.
Yeah, like just those everyday observations.
Exactly. It's almost as if we're projecting a bit of personality onto the AI based on how we type,
Kind of like reading into their tone. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Like if
Yeah.
you type something in all lowercase, let's say, hey, how do I bake a cake? It just feels super chill and informal, right?
Oh, yeah, totally laid back.
And there's actually some anecdotal evidence suggesting that LLMs can pick up on this casual vibe and kind of mirror it in their responses.
It's like they're adapting to how we're talking to them.
Yeah.
Which is wild when you think about it.
Totally. Now, let's flip the script. What happens at the other end of the spectrum? What if we go all out with the caps lock?
Oh, yeah, like shouting at the AI.
Exactly. Imagine typing something like, what is the best way to bake a cake? In all caps. It definitely feels like you're emphasizing something.
Oh, for sure. There's definitely emphasis there.
Maybe even a sense of urgency or excitement. And again, some of the less formal observations hint that the AI can interpret that emphasis. It's fascinating how these subtle cues seem to come through.
Yeah, it makes you wonder just how much they're picking up on.
So we've got all lowercase feeling super casual, all caps feeling like we're shouting. What about when we take that standard approach? Capitalizing the first letter of a sentence and keeping the rest lowercase the way we typically write?
And that textbook style.
Right. What does that feel like in the context of interacting with AI?
It feels more neutral, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely more formal than all lowercase, but it's not screaming like all caps.
That's a good way to put it. It's like that polite, straightforward way of communicating. It's like you're sending an email to a colleague or something.
Right. That standard vibe. It really does make you think, Like, have you ever, as a listener, noticed these subtle shifts in how AI responds just based on how you're using capital letters? It's something a lot of people experience, even if they haven't really sat down and thought about it.
So we've got these gut feelings, these initial impressions. But let's move beyond just hunches and get a bit more formal. Let's look at what capitalization actually does in language, both for us humans and for these super complex language models.
Right. Let's get a bit more technical.
Okay, so from a linguistic perspective, capitalization has a few really crucial roles.
It's not just about aesthetics, right?
Exactly. Like, it's absolutely fundamental for telling apart proper nouns, those specific names of people, places, organizations, like Paris or Google.
Right? Like Paris, the city versus Paris, if you were,
Hmm.
I don't know, talking about the Greek myth.
Exactly. Capitalization helps separate those proper nouns from common nouns like city or company. It's a signal.
Huge signal. It also marks the start of a sentence, which helps us understand the flow of ideas.
Oh, absolutely. And you can also use capitalization strategically to highlight specific words or phrases you want to emphasize.
Like when you really want something to stand out, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
So it's clear that capitalization is way more than just a stylistic choice. It has real meaning.
it carries semantic weight. That's the fancy way of saying it impacts meaning.
And that brings us to how AI interprets all of this. Proper capitalization actually helps an AI understand the context of what you're saying.
Like it's giving the AI clues about what's important.
Exactly. It signals a level of formality and helps the AI pick out the unique or significant terms, especially in things like titles, headings, or when you're talking about a specific company or organization.
Proper nouns, like we were saying.
Yeah. And that level of formality can make a big difference in getting accurate and relevant answers from the AI, especially when you're dealing with more professional or academic
No,
topics.
totally. Like imagine you're asking for very specific data about a company. You definitely want to make sure you capitalize its name correctly.
Absolutely. So when you need that precise and contextually appropriate answer, especially in a more formal setting, correct capitalization is key. It really highlights that capitalization isn't just a visual thing.
It's more like a fundamental part of how we as humans understand language and how AI systems try to do the same.
Okay, so we're starting to see how different capitalization styles can carry different meanings, even if they're subtle. But what happens when we put this to the test? Let's talk about the comparative analysis you mentioned earlier, where you guys asked the same question but with different capitalization styles.
Oh, yeah, that was a fun one. We took the same question. How does climate change affect polar bears? But presented it to an LLM in 3 different ways.
Okay, so one version with that typical sentence case,
Yep, exactly like how we normally write.
then one version with everything in all caps.
Had to make it feel dramatic, right?
Mm.
And then the last one with no capitalization at all.
Just all lowercase, super chill.
Exactly. We wanted to see how those subtle changes in capitalization would change the AI's response.
I'm betting they did. Okay, let's start with the standard sentence case version. What kind of answer did the AI give for that one?
So for the sentence case prompt, the AI's response was super comprehensive, like a really well-articulated explanation.
Like a textbook answer, you mean?
Yeah, pretty much. She gave us all the details, explaining how climate change is melting sea ice, which is a huge problem for polar bears because they need that ice to hunt seals.
Which is their main food source.
Right, exactly. And they also need the ice for breeding. So it was a very thorough, informative answer.
So basically what you would expect, a nice in-depth explanation. What happened when you shouted the same question at the AI? You know, the all caps version. How does climate change affect polar bears?
Oh, that one was interesting. The AI's response was way more concise and to the point.
Like it was getting straight to the point.
Exactly. It just went straight for the biggest problem, that melting sea ice is making it really hard for polar bears to find enough food. It even highlighted the threats to their survival.
Like it was trying to sound the alarm or something.
Yeah, there was definitely that sense of urgency, even though it was just text on a screen.
Wow, so it mirrored the intensity of the all caps input. That's really cool. Okay, last but not least, what about the all lowercase, super relaxed version of the question? How does climate change affect polar bears?
So the no caps response was the shortest and most informal of the 3.
Like it was keeping things super simple.
Totally. It just said that the melting ice makes it harder for polar bears to hunt seals. And then it mentioned that their habitat is disappearing, so they're facing more challenges.
Short, sweet, and to the point.
Yep. It felt much more casual than the other 2.
So we're seeing a clear pattern here. Sentence case gives you that detailed, comprehensive response. All caps makes things more direct and urgent. And no caps is all about keeping it brief and informal.
It's almost like the AI is picking up on those social cues we associate with different ways of using capital letters.
It's wild, right? And this really highlights that even tiny details can affect how these powerful tools respond. But let's go even deeper. How do these LLMs actually process all of this at a fundamental level?
All right, time to get technical.
Yeah, let's talk about tokenization, a term that comes up a lot in discussions about AI.
Tokenization. This is where we get to the heart of how these models understand language. Basically, it's the process of breaking down what you type into smaller pieces called tokens.
So like dissecting a sentence into words or even parts of words?
You got it.
Oh.
Tokens are like those building blocks of language that the model can then analyze and work with.
Okay, I'm following you. So where does capitalization fit into all of this?
So when it comes to capitalization, tokenization can happen in two main ways.
Okay, lay it on me.
It can be case-sensitive or case-insensitive.
Two different approaches.
Exactly. So with case-sensitive tokenization, the AI treats a word like dog and dog as completely separate tokens.
So a capital D versus a lowercase d makes a big difference.
Oh yeah, a huge difference. It means the model can pick up on those subtle changes in meaning that come with capitalization.
So like a proper noun at the beginning of a sentence versus the same word used as a common noun somewhere else in the text.
Exactly. To the AI, those are two completely different things.
Almost like two different words entirely. Okay, that's case-sensitive. What about case-insensitive tokenization?
So case-insensitive is all about simplification. Before the text is even broken down into tokens, everything gets converted to the same case, usually lowercase.
So it's like leveling the playing field for all the letters.
Exactly. This way, the model has fewer unique tokens to deal with, but it also means that any information encoded in the original capitalization is lost.
So dog and dog would both become dog, and the AI wouldn't know the difference.
Right. It simplifies things, but it can also mean missing out on some important nuances.
I can see the trade-off there.
Yeah, it's a balance.
Yeah.
So going back to capitalization, this can affect how words, especially those proper nouns we talked about, are tokenized.
Give me an example.
Sure, think about the word Apple.
Like the tech company.
Exactly. Apple, with a capital A, the company, might be tokenized differently than Apple with a lowercase a, the fruit, if the tokenizer is case sensitive.
So the AI could tell them apart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
LLMs are trained to understand that different meanings and contexts can be attached to a word depending on its capitalization.
It's all about those subtle cues like we were talking about before.
Right, and if the AI gets the capitalization wrong because of case-insensitive tokenization, it can lead to some weird and confusing answers.
So like it might not understand what you're really asking.
Exactly. It might give you information about apples the fruit
Yeah.
when you were actually asking about Apple the company.
So that choice case-sensitive versus case-insensitive right at the very beginning really sets the stage for how the AI understands everything that comes after.
For sure, it's a foundational decision, and it all connects back to the structure of these language models.
How so? I'm curious how those neural network architectures we always hear about handle all this case sensitivity stuff.
It's actually pretty amazing. So those architectures that process text sequentially, like recurrent neural networks, RNNs, and those long short-term memory networks, LSTMs, they can be designed to take advantage of case sensitivity.
But only if the initial tokenization keeps that information intact.
Right. Exactly. If that information's there, these architectures can learn different patterns based on whether a word is capitalized or not, as long as they've been trained on enough data that includes those variations. It all comes down to the training data.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about transformers? They're kind of the big players in the AI world these days, right?
Oh, for sure. Transformers are the powerhouses behind a lot of the super impressive language models we see now.
So how do they handle capitalization? Do they care about uppercase versus lowercase?
So transformers have this incredible ability to analyze an entire chunk of text all at once. They use what's called self-attention, which lets them figure out which parts of the input are the most important. And if the tokens contain case information, they can definitely factor that in.
They can see the whole picture and use that capitalization as a clue.
Exactly. But here's the thing. These massive pre-trained models have been trained on an unbelievable amount of text. Like, think mountains of data. And that data includes all kinds of capitalization styles.
So they've seen it all.
Pretty much. And that helps them be really good at generalizing and understanding different ways of writing.
So even if someone throws in some weird capitalization, the AI can probably figure it out.
Most likely. But here's a little caveat. If you hit them with something truly bizarre or totally inconsistent capitalization, their behavior might be a bit unpredictable, especially if there aren't any other strong clues in the prompt to help them understand what you mean.
So like if you're intentionally messing with the AI, the results might be a little wonky.
Yeah, they might not quite get it.
Okay, so we've talked about case sensitivity and tokenization as separate things. But how do they actually work together to shape the AI's response?
It's all connected, really. So first, we have that initial tokenization step, breaking down the text into those little tokens. And as we talked about, capitalization can play a big role in how that happens.
How about the first filter?
Exactly. The presence or absence of capital letters can actually change a word's meaning, like our apple and apple example. Or it can even lead to a single word getting split into multiple tokens if the tokenization is case sensitive.
And that's because the model sees them as different units of meaning, right?
Exactly, like they have different weights or interpretations.
And this distinction where uppercase and lowercase are treated as separate things, that's the core of case-sensitive processing, right?
It is. It's all about recognizing those subtle distinctions. And, this approach can actually increase the total number of tokens the AI has to handle. Because a word like, let's say, example could be example, or example, and each of those could be treated as a unique token.
So more tokens, more information, but also more complexity.
That's the trade-off. But the big advantage of case sensitivity is that it lets the AI accurately identify things like proper nouns, acronyms, all those elements that rely on capitalization to convey their meaning.
So the AI has a more complete picture of what's going on in the text.
Right. It leads to a richer, more nuanced understanding.
Okay, so we've got different LLM architectures, and they all handle case sensitivity in their own way. Can we look at some specific examples to see how it works in practice?
Definitely. Let's start with BERT, one of the most famous architectures out there. And, there are two main versions of BERT. There's BERT cased and BERT uncased.
The names are pretty self-explanatory.
Totally. So BERT uncased was trained on text that had been converted entirely to lowercase. So basically, it ignores any differences in capitalization in the text you give it.
It's like it doesn't even see them.
Right. And this can actually be really helpful for tasks where the case of a word doesn't really matter.
Where it's all about the general idea, not the specifics.
Exactly. Now, BERT cased is the opposite. It was trained on text with all the original capitalization, so it pays attention to those uppercase and lowercase letters.
So it keeps all that information in the mix.
It does. And this makes BERT cased much better at tasks where capitalization is super important for understanding the meaning. Like named entity recognition. That's where the AI tries to identify names of people, organizations, locations, all those specific things.
So like picking out all the company names in a news article, for example.
Exactly. For that kind of task, BERT case would probably give you more accurate results because they can tell the difference between apple and apple.
It knows one is a fruit and one is a giant tech company. Okay, that's BERT. What about other popular architectures? Like the GPT models, those are really good at generating text, right?
Oh yeah, GPT-2 and all the even bigger ones that came after it. Those are awesome for text generation. And they usually use a type of tokenization called byte pair encoding BPE for short. And in their case, it's generally case sensitive.
So they do distinguish between uppercase and lowercase.
They do. In fact, they even assign different numerical IDs to a word like hello with a capital H versus hello, all lowercase.
Wow, so they're really paying attention to the details.
They are. But here's the interesting part. Even though their tokenization is case sensitive, some research suggests that these GPT models are actually pretty robust when it comes to changes in case.
So even if you mess up the capitalization a bit, they can still figure it out.
Yeah, kind of. Studies have shown that their internal understanding of the text can stay surprisingly stable, even when you change the capitalization of some letters. Sometimes even more stable than models like BERT.
That's kind of surprising. You'd think that case-sensitive tokenization would make them more sensitive to those changes.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, right? But the thinking is that it's because of how much data they're trained on and the specific way they break down words. They seem to learn those underlying patterns and meanings, even with some variation in the capitalization.
It's like they can see through the surface level to the core meaning.
Right. What about some other big names?
Yeah.
Roberta, XLNet, T5. Those come up a lot too.
Yeah, what's their typical approach to capitalization?
So those models, in their standard configurations, usually don't lowercase the input text by default. They like to keep things as they are, preserving the original case. So they're more like BERT-cased and those GPT models in that sense.
They can use that case information if it's helpful.
Exactly. So we've got a good overview of the different strategies these AI systems use. Now, how does all of this affect the specific tasks we use them for?
Yeah, let's get practical. How does case sensitivity impact the real-world stuff? Let's start with sentiment analysis. That's where the AI tries to figure out the emotion behind a piece of text, right? Like, is it positive, negative, neutral?
Exactly. And while the words themselves are the most important clues, capitalization can play a role too.
It's like that extra layer of meaning.
It is. Like if you write a whole sentence in uppercase, something like, "This is amazing,"
Hmm.
it usually feels more intense than just writing, "This is amazing," in a normal way.
Yeah, you can feel the excitement.
Right. So even though some older sentiment analysis techniques used to just convert everything to lowercase to keep things simple, with these new LLMs, it's better to keep the original case so the AI can pick up on those emotional cues.
Otherwise, you might lose some of that nuance.
For sure. What about named entity recognition? That's all about identifying specific names, right?
NER. That's where the AI is like a detective trying to pick out the important people, places, and organizations in a text. And that's where case sensitivity is absolutely essential.
Couldn't agree more. Capitalization is often the biggest clue that a word is a proper noun. It's like a giant flashing sign saying, "Hey, pay attention to me. I'm important."
Right. Like our apple versus apple example, the lowercase a is just a fruit, but the capital A is probably the tech company.
Exactly. And that's why case-sensitive models like Uppercase are so good at NER. They use that capitalization information to make those distinctions.
They can tell who's who in the text. Okay, last one, topic classification. That's about figuring out the main subject of a piece of text.
Right. Like, is it about technology, health, politics, sports, whatever?
Yeah.
So with topic classification, there's been a bit more debate about case sensitivity over the years. Sometimes people would just convert everything to lowercase because they figured the topic was the same, regardless of the capitalization.
So they are prioritizing simplicity.
Yeah, exactly. But there are definitely cases where capitalization matters a lot for understanding the topic. Like, think about those specialized terms or acronyms that are really specific to a certain topic. Like if you see WHO in all caps, you know it means the World Health Organization. That's a huge clue that the text is probably about health or global issues. But if you just see WHO in lowercase, it could be anything.
So the capitalization helps narrow down the meaning.
Exactly. And while most of those fancy transformer models used for topic classification these days keep the original capitalization, it's still something to be aware of, especially if you're doing any kind of pre-processing that involves converting text to lowercase. You don't want to accidentally lose those important case distinctions in keywords or names that give you clues about the topic.
So always be mindful of those little details.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. And it's clear that even something as seemingly small as capitalization can have a big impact on how these LLMs work.
So how can we use all of this knowledge when we're actually interacting with these AIs ourselves? How can we make our prompts better?
Prompt engineering, that's the art of crafting those questions and instructions that get the best results from LLMs. And understanding how case sensitivity works can be a big help.
So like knowing when to capitalize and when not to.
Exactly. Especially for tasks where you need super precise answers, like if you're generating code or pulling specific data from a database. The way you capitalize your prompt can influence how the LLM understands what you want, and that can change the output you get.
Can you give me a real-world example?
Sure. Imagine you're using an LLM to get a definition of something, let's say quantum entanglement.
Okay, that's a good one. Pretty complex topic.
It is. So if you prompt the AI with define quantum entanglement in all caps, you might get a very formal, very technical definition. But if you ask, define quantum entanglement in regular or lowercase, you might get a simpler explanation that's easier to understand.
So the all caps is like asking for the super scientific version.
Right, and the lowercase is like saying, just give me the basics. It's subtle, but the AI can pick up on those cues.
So it's not just about the words themselves, it's about how we present them through capitalization.
Exactly. It's another layer of communication. And that's why it's so important to experiment with different capitalization styles when you're working with these LLMs. Try out the same prompt with all caps, all lowercase, sentence case, and see how the AI responds.
So it's all about finding the right approach for the specific AI you're using.
Totally. It helps you understand how it thinks and what kind of input it responds to best.
Okay, we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive. What are the most important takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
Okay, so the big one is that many of the powerful LLMs we use today rely on case-sensitive tokenization. That means they treat words with different capitalization as different things. And that can have a huge impact on how they understand and respond to what we type.
It's all about those subtle distinctions.
Right. It's also crucial to remember that not all models are the same.
Some are more sensitive to case than others.
Exactly. Some, like BERT uncased, are designed to be case insensitive. Others, like Birdcase and the GPT models, are case-sensitive. Each approach has its own pros and cons.
And the importance of case really depends on what you're asking the AI to do.
Definitely. Like with sentiment analysis, keeping the original capitalization can help the AI pick up on those emotional cues. For named entity recognition, case is super important for identifying those specific names and entities. And even with topic classification, where people used to think case didn't matter as much, you still have to be careful about accidentally removing those important distinctions.
So be mindful of the specific model you're using, how its tokenizer works, and what you're trying to achieve.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And if you really want to get the most out of these LLMs, don't be afraid to experiment. Try out different capitalization styles and see how the AI reacts.
It's all about learning how to communicate effectively with these powerful tools.
Exactly. We've covered a lot, and it's clear that even something as small as capitalization can make a big difference in the world of AI.
It's a good reminder that these systems are incredibly complex, and the way we interact with them can subtly shape the results we get.
It's true. By understanding how things like tokenization and case sensitivity work, we can become better at communicating with these AIs, and that opens up a whole world of possibilities.
As these technologies continue to evolve and become even more integrated into our lives, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does.
How will future LLMs handle all the complexities of human language, including all those little details like capitalization? And what amazing things will we be able to do with them?
It's exciting to think about.
It really is. Thanks so much for taking this deep dive with us. This has been incredibly insightful.